if I don't get my identity right, there is a promise that I may not inherit, but there's also a whole generation after me that is attached to my promise that they might not inherit as well if their identity is not rooted and found in God. I think that the enemy will always go after your identity because he knows that if he's got your identity, then he's got your victory. And I think that that is imperative, that you know who you are. You know that you are a child of God. And I believe it's not a one-time revelation. I believe you don't figure out your identity one time and you get revelation through the word. I believe that there are situations, circumstances, giants, trials, life, business, marriage, where you have to remind yourself of who you are.
You almost start living life where you're just always chasing and pursuing and never enjoying. You know, when you know your identity's in God, like every day you're developing and enjoying the journey because God's unveiling and revealing different parts and intricacies of who you are, who he's called you to be. And I think that there's three different things that people start to place their identity in. One is trials, like what you were saying, Brand, like, you know, what I'm going through, what I've gone through, the past, and you kind of start bringing these feelings and memories from the past into your future. And now today just looks a lot like yesterday. And then tomorrow looks just like that as well. So you're just living in this pattern that's just continuing to repeat itself. And then it's a trophy in the title, right? I mean, for a long time, it was just like, if I could get a better title, my position, like my job, what I say about myself, what do I do? That's my identity. And then it became like my trophies, my accomplishments. If I can get another win or a victory, then that feeling will be subsided. And what you realize is like that pursuit, it just never leads to true fulfillment. In fact, as you get it, what is more uncovered is how deep that void truly is, because now you've got what you thought was going to be the solution to actually fill it.
One thing that we don't do is we don't just say it one time, which is what a lot of people do. It's like, these are our values, these are our intentions, this is our vision. You say it one time and you forget about it. It's like, no, we say this stuff all the time, every day. It's like we repeat it over and over, and it just becomes the DNA. It becomes a language. Like every country, nation has a language, right? So when someone comes in, they got like a English accent, you're like, oh, you're from England, you're from the Philippines, you're from wherever. It's because they speak a certain way. Mm-hmm. Well, your business, your culture, your family, your church, man, you should have a language. Oh, those people that go to God's house, those people, they work at Leveled Up Life. Like, that's them. They're from there. It's because they speak a certain way. But the same is true for the opposite. They're from there. Good. You know, because their culture is bad. So you got to decide. Like, you're either going to design it by intention or by default. But either way, you're going to have a culture. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Leveled Up Life podcast. As always, Mariah Courtney with Paul McLean every single week. We show up and try to help bring value to your life, whether that's an encouragement, motivation, inspiration, trying to help you level up in all the areas that matter most to us: faith, family, fitness, franchise, and finance. And hopefully by this point, episode number 15. Let's go. Oh, and so thanks for tuning in. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, share it with a friend, all the good stuff. You know what to do. But Paul McLean, man, we got a special guest today.
Extra special for you, bro. This is extra special for you.
I know
this is your favorite guest, right?
My favorite guest by far.
Yeah, you're not dumb. If you were dumb, you'd have said, I don't know. But she's definitely your favorite guest.
100%.
And probably the guest you're most intimate with, for sure.
You could say I got four kids with her. So
yeah, it's been 4 good nights at least, right? But hey, I'm excited to bring on Mariah Courtney because, guys, let me just tell you real quick. She is just somebody that is anointed with the gift of God to communicate, to inspire, to equip, to empower. And that's the whole thing. We're not just trying to give you inspiration. We're also trying to give you, the ability to be equipped in such a way where you can take action and level up your life. Where you're like, okay, these are practical things. And so today, this is somebody just to, I know it's we kind of take it as something so familiar, but, you guys have built and run a church that's got thousands of people that go to it. And the beautiful thing about that is the amount of baptisms that have come from that. Mm-hmm. And T, your messages are always just significantly impactful. And now you're also speaking in the business world and connecting with different corporations and businesses. And it's kind of like, well, how's that working? It's working phenomenal because I've heard the reports in the news of people saying, man, this has been so good. And so today, guys, we're going to be talking about the 5 things to put on your summer bucket list. And on your summer bucket list. And so excited,
Mariah Courtney.
Excited to have you on here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Well, let's talk about it.
Level up life. Let's talk about it. Let's jump into it.
So what's the first bucket list item? Now, this is different than what most people think. So they think bucket list, like, oh, this summer I'm going to go to Hawaii.
Right.
I'm going to swim with the dolphins.
Yes.
I'm going to get
a tan.
Yeah, I'm going to get a tattoo.
I wouldn't say that, but you know.
Well, I'm definitely going to get a tan.
Yeah.
Hey, the funny thing is, I was talking to Hillary. She's like, "Gosh, you're already getting darker again, you know." And by the end of the summer, like people confuse me as being, you know, black.
Yeah.
They're like,
yeah.
So we'll see what happens. But let's talk about it. What's the first bucket list item?
So first thing on my personal bucket list this summer is I'm going to build on just my identity and my confidence. I think that it's one of the most underrated qualities to have as a leader, as a mom, as a wife, as a pastor. I believe that there is something so impactful when you enter a room and feel like you've got a seat at the table. You just got this self-belief, this self-confidence. I know who I am. I know my vision, my mission. I know my values. And so that for me is identity and confidence. It's our number one thing this summer.
Yeah, you know, dude, it makes me think of like, you know, I'd go to meetings and I'd always interview the top producers. We'd have like these panels. We'd have the vice president panels, all the agency owners, and I would go through. My whole goal was to extract the commonalities of success. And so somebody that was like just getting started, they say, okay, that's a common trait, right? Because success leaves clues and there's a recipe to it. And the one thing I'd always find to be true is that confidence was consistent with every top producer. Yep. Every VP or agency owner, they were just confident. And it wasn't arrogance, it was just confidence in like, you know, I'm keeping the promises I'm making to myself.
Yes.
Right? And casting these votes that I'm going to be successful because I'm doing what I'm saying I'm going to do. Even on the little things and these baby tasks, I'm going to keep my commitments to those, and then confidence kind of builds. And so what do you think T is like? So, you know, and I say T, it's Mariah, but that's her nickname, right? So for you guys, you know, so I'm going to be messed up.
Just put her on blast.
Yeah, T. TT is the ant name, right? Yes. So if you ever get into the close inner circle, and you're actually, you know, get to a point where you're, you know, blessed enough to call her TT, right? Yeah. But so talk about like, you know, what's some of the things that you believe will help somebody build their confidence and help level up their identity, where they start to see themselves in the way that's going to help them, you know, reach these new levels as they go through summer and come out on the other side of it.
Well, the first thing I think of when it comes to identity and confidence is I will unapologetically say that I believe that can only be found in the one who created you. Of course, I'm a pastor, so it's just what I believe to the core of my being. And I think of the Israelites. They were getting ready to enter the promised land, Numbers 13:33, and they send in 10 spies to spy out the land, the promise that God had given them. And 8 of the 10 spies' response was, we can't go inherit the land. It's already inhabited. There's giants in the land. And then they make this statement, which is a pure attack on their identity. They say, and we were like grasshoppers in our own eyes. And I thought, man, if I don't get my identity right, there is a promise that I may not inherit, but there's also a whole generation after me that is attached to my promise that they might not inherit as well if their identity is not rooted and found in God. And so I think that the enemy will always go after your identity because he knows that if he's got your identity, then he's got your victory. And I think that is imperative that you know who you are. You know that you are a child of God. And I believe it's not a one-time revelation. I believe you don't figure out your identity one time and you get revelation through the word. I believe that there are situations, circumstances, giants, trials, life, business, marriage, where you have to remind yourself of who you are, because there's battles to be won every day. That's really good. Back to your question, I believe a practical tool, a practical handlebar to build your identity is to get in your word, remind yourself of who God says you are. If you don't tell yourself who God says you are, the world will define you for you. And that's where I feel like you find yourself in trouble like the Israelites did. So, I mean, there's so many affirmations, being in the Word, and one of the things I'm passionate about is getting in church.
That's good.
Yeah.
Really good. I think I've heard you say it this way. You got to convince yourself that you are someone, right?
Yep.
You got to convince yourself that you are worthy of love. You are worthy of friendship. You are worthy of like having a good life, right? Like the promise is for you. God said like the promised land is for all of you.
Right.
But it was the two that came back and said, well, God said it, we can have it, right? So the life that God wants you to have is a life of, like the Zoe life, right?
Yeah.
The abundant life, the overflowing, the milk and honey.
Yep.
It's for everyone. It's not just for the select few or the chosen or the elite. It's like for everyone, but you got to see yourself as someone who's worthy to live that life. So someone looking at you going like, all right, Mariah, clearly we know why you're confident, right? You're extremely good looking, you know, you're articulate. Like you got
casting
long
some
hair,
votes for tonight, bro. I see you.
Green eyes. Like it's
intentional.
It's easy to okay, Mariah. Of course you're confident, but like you weren't always that way.
Right.
You weren't always just like this bold little firecracker who gets up on stage and declares like all
100%.
these. Like talk about that. Like someone who's I could see why she's that way, but like not me. Like I just have a regular life.
Yeah.
You know, there's nothing real special about me. I'm not that like they would see themselves as not good enough or not worthy.
Right.
How does someone like that kind of gain value or gain wisdom or start to build their confidence?
Right. Well, I love what you said about self-value. And I believe that value and identity go hand in hand, right? You won't know your value unless you know who you are and how God thinks about you. And so I think that when you think about it in the grand scheme of things, you could be successful. You can make the money. You can, do all these things, a leveled up life, right? And lay your head to bed at night, and you could still ask the question, why? Why am I still unhappy? Why am I still not fulfilled? Why do I still feel like there's more for me? And it's because you haven't found your value in your true identity. And I think that for me, it has been a journey of discipline, of reminding myself of who I am when I feel like the opposite of that. I don't know if that kind of answers the question you're asking, but I feel like it's a habit. It's a daily, repetitive discipline of telling myself what God thinks about me rather than the way that I feel in the natural.
Well, I think so many people, they identify based on not what God says about them, but what their circumstance is.
Right.
Right. So like they're facing a real reality every single day, and they look out and go, hey, nothing about me is extraordinary. Nothing about my life is significant. And so that's how they start to build their significance. So what you're saying is no matter what circumstances or life or obstacles or giants you're facing, none of those things, good or bad, define who you are.
Right.
Right. So you got to find your identity, your self-confidence in who God says you are.
Yeah.
And really that's what it comes down to at the end of the day, because you can have every one of those boxes checked, money, fame. You could have all the boxes of success, quote unquote, checked. But if you don't know who you are, you still lay in bed at night with an imposter syndrome because you're like, I don't know how I got this, I don't know how I deserve this, and you feel you don't feel worthy of it. Yeah, because you have you don't know where it comes from.
Right.
I think for everybody too, man, you almost start living life where you're just always chasing and pursuing and never enjoying. When you know your identity's in God, like every day you're developing and enjoying the journey because God's unveiling and revealing different parts and intricacies of who you are and who He's called you to be. And I think that there's three different things that people start to place their identity in. One is trials, like what you were saying, Brian, like, what I'm going through, what I've gone through, the past. And you kind of start bringing these feelings and memories from the past into your future. And now today just looks a lot like yesterday. Yep. Yeah. And then tomorrow looks just like that as well. And so you're just living in this pattern that's just continuing to repeat itself. And then it's a trophy in the title, right? I mean, for a long time, it was just like, if I could get a better title for my position, like my job, what I say about myself, what do I do? That's my identity. And then became like my trophies, my accomplishments. If I can get another win or a victory, then that feeling will be subsided. And what you realize is like that pursuit, it just never leads to true fulfillment. In fact, as you get it, what is more uncovered is how deep that void truly is, because now you got what you thought was going to be the solution to actually fill it. And so I think that's such a big point for anybody on here, and we all have that. And I think it's easy to put people on a pedestal where you're like, oh, that person just doesn't feel the way I feel. Man, I've been battling from day one with this feeling of like not being good enough, right? And that's allowed some of the successes to take place because it was like me proving that I was. But when I would get the success, I would feel more lost and deeply hurt because it wasn't fulfilling.
Yeah.
And you only kind of find that
the thing that you thought will fulfill actually brings a bigger void.
It actually reveals how big the void truly is too, you know. And I think that's such a big part. So that's the first bucket list item. Is spend some time. You got to spend some time with yourself, and sometimes it sucks.
Yeah.
You look in that mirror and you start to become aware of like, man, this is really what I've got going on, and I've been really believing in life for a long time. Sometimes it's hard to be faced with that.
Right.
But if you're not faced with that, you can't move from there. I love that. Bucket list number 2. Let's go to number 2.
That's good.
Servant leadership.
Servant leadership. Let's go with it.
Come on, we gotta be better leaders.
Yep.
The best leaders are servants first.
Yeah.
Right. The best leaders are not the one that's necessarily given orders and dictating life, but the best leaders are the one that's out ahead. Helping everyone else accomplish what they're trying to accomplish. Right.
Yeah.
And so the more people you can help, the better leader you are. So talk about, I've seen your leadership skills develop over time. We lead in different ways, right? Mm-hmm. We lead in everyone's leadership abilities are different. But one thing I've seen you always do is you lead from a place of such love. You lead from a place of compassion. You lead from a place of just trying to help people along the way, right? I think a lot of, especially the world that we live in now, you see a lot of these successful high-level leaders, but then you start to talk to their inner circle, and it's like, man, this dude's a jerk, or this woman's like bossy or arrogant or stuck up. The more you start to really uncover who they are, and I think for you it'd be the exact opposite. People around you saying like, man, she leads with so much compassion, with love, like she's always there. Her leadership is just like a willing heart. Like, talk about your leadership style, what that looks like. What does a servant leader do? How can why is that a bucket list? Like, how? Because someone might listen to this and say, I'm not a leader at all.
Right.
Like, I'm not a pastor. I'm not a business owner. I'm just a mom.
Right.
I'm just a wife. I'm just an employee. Like, talk about leadership, and then not only just leadership, but servant leadership. What does that look like?
Well, I think that servant.
And how could you serve me?
You are served very well, in my opinion. Servant leadership, I think, is really just this mentality that you live by. And it is in any area of your life. I have this mentality that I'm not living to get, I'm living to give. I'm looking for ways to give. I'm looking for ways to love. I'm looking for ways to show appreciation. I'm looking for ways to give grace. And I think that when you get that mentality, you wake up, or when you think of your marriage, right? How can I love him? How can I serve him? I want something from him. I know, like, you want something from me tonight.
Put this.
But how can I serve you? How can I love you? And I think that I was taught what servant leadership was, not through just preaching, but through example. I believe I've watched many leaders and mentors in my life, one being my mom, always showing what it looks like to serve, to not live with just what can I accumulate, what can I get for myself, what will make me happy, and how can I get the win, right? It's how can I serve you, how can I love you, how can I set you up to win? And I believe it is a reason why our church is so amazing. I'm not biased or anything, but I believe that it is something that not only we have taught, but we've exemplified in our action. And I believe it's caught on. It spreads, So I think that just living life with this thought, this idea, how can I serve you? How can I love you? Is really what servant leadership is.
Well, selfish leadership is all about me.
Right.
But servant leadership is all about the person.
Yes.
How could you serve them and bless them and help them accomplish what they're trying to get?
Yeah.
And in turn, you actually get what you're trying to get as well, right?
Yeah, and I believe that that's tied to identity as well. If I'm confident in who I am, if I'm confident in my purpose, what I'm called to do, then it's a lot easier to love and be a servant leader when I've got a strong identity.
Well, I mean, the best leaders are the ones that serve and sacrifice for those who they're leading, right? Jesus even said, I didn't come here to be served, although if there's anyone worthy to be served, it's God who came down, who didn't have to, but came to earth to be our sacrifice, and didn't come to be served, right? He came to serve others, and he shows that by obviously his whole life, but one example is he kneels down and he washes his disciples' feet, which is like the lowest possible thing that you can do. And even the people around him was like, Jesus, what are you doing? Like, we got people for that.
Yeah.
Like, it was a custom. It wasn't like a weird thing back then. But say, hey, we got people for that. He's like, no, like, you will let me wash your feet, Peter. If you don't, you got no part of me. And Peter's like, wash all of me then, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like even Jesus, the King of Kings, came as a servant, right? Which is incredible. And it's our model that we live by, right? Servant leadership. So it's like bucket list item number 2, man. How could we serve more people?
Yeah.
And in turn, it makes us a better leader,
exactly.
Right? So really good.
You know, it's like that quote: if you help enough other people get what they want, you'll get what you want.
Right.
You know, and
Maxwell.
Yeah, it's probably, but you know, this stuff's so applicable. Like you look at, like, I love your analogy with Jesus, because it's like, he's influenced more people than anybody in the entire world.
Yeah. And
not just like somebody of faith. You know, I was talking to a guy that I went out and did a podcast with last week, and he's like, man, I go to church every week. And he's like, I don't even like identify as a Christian. He's like, I do this and this and this. And I know that Erwin McManus said something like 30% of the people that go to his church don't even really believe in God. Now, a lot of them will get to that process and they're going through. And there's probably a lot of people in the church that used to be on the other side of the aisle, but now they say, hey, God is my Lord and Savior, you know, like, but they go because of like the message. Like, it's just like, you know, the example that Christ gave throughout the word, it's like, it's so infectious. And so as you build an organization or you want to cultivate a good culture, like the most attractive thing you could do is just serve, right? And I think that's one of those things that also breaks those chains of haughtiness, where you kind of build a separation between you and the people that you're called to go out there, equip, serve, and empower, is when you start to think of yourself as mightier than and haughty and look at me. And it's the opposite. And I think the enemy will pull you into that. And I've seen it happen with many people that have been very, very successful, 9-figure income earners, where they once were washing feet, so to speak, and then they were looking for, okay, well, look at what I've done now. Can you wash mine? Right. And at that point in time, and that's where the great fall always seems to come right around the corner. And so if you're watching this and you're in sales or anything and you're like, I want to be a better closer, well, serve more, right? You know, if you want to help more people, it's not about sales, it's about service. If you can focus on the service, what can I do to help you? Man, you're always going to be taken care of. And that's with marriage, with kids, with everything. Right. You know, so that's a great bucket list. I like that one. That's a good one. So number 3, what are we doing? 3 is building.
Number 3, be the culture you want to see. Bucket list item number 3. How do we be the culture we want to see? Not just at our workplace or at church, but really, like, I think about, you know, we just moved into a new house not too long ago, and we've always kind of had this vision, desire to have a clean house. I don't know how it is for your house, but like, man, we've been praying.
Bro, you know how it is for my house.
We've been praying about
how
a
it
clean
is for
house
my
for
house.
years. We're like, man, we just want the culture of our house to be clean and welcoming and homey, right? And it's like you're stuck in this environment where it's hard because the culture is not. It's like this mythical thing that we all talk about, right? But really, the culture is just the behavior of the people. Exactly. So it's like, you may be in a messed up culture, like in your house. Like the culture is just like, hey, you eat dinner, everyone leaves the plate out, everyone leaves the trash out, you know, shoes just go here, and that's just the culture that you're stuck in. So it's like, if you want to change the culture of maybe your house, your workplace, your relationships, your church, whatever it is, well, first you got to be the culture you want to see. And so in this new house that we moved in not too long ago, like, man, we're trying to raise the culture standard in the house. And so now you walk in, man, that baby's clean.
Yeah, we've done
it's
a
only
good
been
job.
It's only been 3 weeks. But it's clean, you know what I mean?
Give it a couple more weeks,
Teamwork.
and it'll be long lasting, man. Just don't give up now.
I know.
It's about to set root into the habit.
That's actually good, because so many people have told me, oh, you just wait, it's going to get messy again. I've said the exact opposite.
Give it a couple more weeks, man.
Yeah, culture killers.
Yeah, you got to get rid of those people.
Yeah.
So talk about that, like, if we want to be the culture we want to see, like, how do you begin to do that? How do you change culture? How do you change environments? Like, if that's a bucket list item that we're trying to shift, you know, a culture in any area of life, how does someone go about doing that? And why is it important?
Yeah. I think that, again, it's a mindset. It's a mindset that I have the ability to change a culture when I enter the room. I have the ability to change the atmosphere. I have the ability to make other people around me better. But if I don't believe that that's who I am, then I'll never be the culture. I'll just default to what the culture has been, the culture that has been set. So we've really, I feel like, done a good job at this. I'm not going to lie, as far as in our church. I believe that when we have agreed that when we have pulled up to the parking lot, the moment our feet hit the parking lot, it no longer becomes about us. It becomes about the culture we're trying to create. And so it doesn't matter if we got in a fight on the way to church. It doesn't matter the weight we've been, never, right? The weight we're carrying. It doesn't matter the stress or what's going on. It's, okay, we're culture carriers. I'm going to shift the atmosphere when I enter the room. I'm going to have joy. I'm going to have excitement. I'm going to have passion. I'm going to have intentionality, right? And so I think it's a mindset. You got to believe that you have the ability and the power to change the culture around you. I think that a lot of times we default or we live at the mercy of circumstances and situations. And so we kind of let life just happen to us. And I think that when you have created the mindset that I want to be the culture, or I'm going to set the culture, be the culture I want to be, you really kind of, it's almost like a full picture, right? It's like I see the whole thing. I see that it's not just about what's happening in the home right now. It's not just about the current circumstance. I hope this is making sense, but I can actually shift the entire thing by being what I want to see. If I want to be a good friend, or if I want to have good friends, I got to be a good friend. If I want to have a good spouse, I got to be a good spouse. It starts with me.
It's the whole, like, we're thermostats. Like, we set the temperature. Yeah. We're not thermometers. We don't just tell you what it is, and it is what it is. Yeah. No, we set the culture. We set the experience. We set the dynamic. We set the feeling, the tone, the excitement. Exactly. Not just in church, but in life, right? Like, if you want an exciting, life-giving, happy home, well, guess what? You got to be excited, life-giving, and happy. So for you this summer, if this is one of your goals, you're listening to saying, this is good, I want to be, you got to be the culture you want to see. So if you want a great marriage, guess what? You got to invest in that thing. You got to do all the things that you're expecting yourself first, and it starts there. So I love it. I mean, that's applicable to every area of life, whether it's your kids, your I want to be good with my finances. Well, I want to be, it's like, well, you got to be a good steward of that. Like, you got to set the culture of whatever you want. You got to be it first before you just expect everyone else to kind of fall into line. So.
Yeah, well, dude, think about, like, sports, right? Like, I can't remember how many times I've seen, like, somebody win the World Series, and, like, they were barely got in, dude, like, barely kind of got into the playoffs, and then they win it, and they're like, what was the reason? Like, because you guys sucked in the beginning of the year. Like, you don't have the best players. Right. Like, how did this happen? And they're just like, we just had a great culture. Like, we were playing for one another. Like, I had my guys back. He had mine. We had this positive energy. We had this belief. And really what it is culture. And who do they usually whack when the team loses? The head coach. Yep. And what do they want that person to bring in? Not necessarily new players. They want a new culture. You know, can you? And I think it's one of those things that's overplayed, where people hear that word and they almost kind of like, it's been so frequently said they're almost numb to it, like, another culture thing. But this might be the most important thing, you know. And I remember I went to a conference and I came back and I wanted to put in family values to help the culture out, so we could kind of point to something. And we put together the family values. The kids have it in their backpacks on a little, like, 3x5 card we laminated, because if you laminate something, it just makes it important. Yep. We put it on the walls, and it says our family values are: we honor Jesus, we honor parents, and we honor others. Yeah. And it's just one of those things where now, when if they do something that doesn't live up with that value, that culture, the values that are creating the culture, I could say, hey, guys, this is what our values are. We'll even have them write the family values as kind of a consequence. Like, write those, or write a paragraph of how you didn't honor and what it looks like to honor. We're just trying to cultivate the right culture within the family. And I think that's what you guys did a great job, looking back to, like, the launch team of the church, right? I remember, like, being the camera guy. The funny thing is, I remember one of the first videos I watched, I'm like, dude, what is going on with Mariah's head? Because it was set for you. You're taller, by a good foot. And so the whole message is just like a head bobbing around, And I'm like, who the heck was the idiot on the camera guy? And I was like, that was me. I was the idiot on the camera guy.
We had to put you in the right seat.
Yeah. We had to find the right seat. It was all you guys had. It was me, But I look at, like, what you guys did there. It's like your everything you do, everything you say, everything, your behaviors, all of that, your energy that you come into the room with, the way you hold yourself, the way you respond to things, it's kind of like you're knitting a blanket. And, like, that first pattern that you guys knit, it's going to be repeated, and it's going to continue to build this blanket, whether it's going to be one that looks magnificent or one that you're like, dude, that's an ugly, raggedy looking blanket. And I think for anybody on here, I would just encourage you, if you're starting a business, I've had people come up and say, man, I've been encouraged to want to step into, after listening to some of these podcasts, like do something different, man. I feel like I'm called and I have a purpose in this arena. If that's you, realize that the first knit that you make is important. Yep. Like how you start to build that is important. And if you're the other side, you're like, man, my culture sucks. Like whether that's different areas of your life, like you can change that right away.
Right.
Like Mariah, like you said, like you could be the
you gotta
catalyst
identify
for change.
what you want and then go after it and speak it. Like one thing that we don't do is we don't just say it one time, which is what a lot of people do. It's like, these are our values, these are our intentions, this is our vision. And you say it one time and you forget about it. It's like, no, we say this stuff all the time. Every day. It's like we repeat it over and over, and it just becomes the DNA. It becomes a language. Like every country, every nation has a language, right? So when someone comes in, they got like a English accent. You're like, oh, you're from England. You're from the Philippines. You're from wherever. It's because they speak a certain way. Well, your business, your culture, your family, your church, man, you should have a language.
That's good.
Like they should be like, oh, those people, they go to God's house. Oh, those people, oh, they work at Leveled Up Life. Like, oh, those people, oh yeah, they do that. That's them. They're from there. It's because they speak a certain way. But the same is true for the opposite. It's like, they're from there. Good. Because their culture is bad. Yeah, so you got to decide. Like, you're either going to design it by intention or by default. But either way, you're going to have a culture.
Dude, this makes me think. I can't remember where I saw this at or read it. It was so good. They said, like, a kingdom, right? They go out and they colonize different areas, right, and territories. And then that colony is supposed to reflect the kingdom. And everything in that colony is for the kingdom. And basically the analogy that was said was like, you should be a colony for the kingdom of God. So like everything about you should reflect abundance of his promises, your vocabulary, what you say, what you do. Because when a kingdom comes, and if they all of a sudden take over a territory, like if all of a sudden we get taken over by a different kingdom, we're going to change our language. We're going to change the way we do things. We're going to change the way we behave, because now we're no longer a part of that other kingdom. We're part of this kingdom. And I think that that's a big part, going back to all of this and this bucket list. Like when you talked about identity, it's like if your identity is rooted in the right kingdom, then you're going to have a culture that reflects that kingdom, because you're a colony of that kingdom. And I think it's an important thing to tie it all together. All right, so let's go through step number. Are we on 5?
Bucket list number 4.
4 or 5?
Number 4.
Get your mind right.
Change your mind, change your world.
Change your mind, change your world.
Talk about how important is mindset. Why should someone change your mindset? Is a good one. I've been stuck in this mindset for 20 years. I ain't changing now. Why is it important? Why should someone intentionally think about their mindset this summer?
Well, I really feel like you guys, both of you, lead the way in mindset. I feel like I've learned so much of the right way of thinking from you guys. I have learned that your mind could be your greatest asset or your greatest liability. I believe that your mind could be the most creative thing or the most destructive thing. I believe that your mind has the ability to see past the trial, the giant, and see beyond.
You're preaching good.
Yeah, see beyond into what God has planned. I just believe that everything starts with your mind. And I think that I'm really passionate about getting your mind right, because it's been my number one greatest struggle. And I think that a lot of people could say the same thing. Thoughts of fear, thoughts of insecurity, thoughts of, whatever it is, shame, guilt. And it's still a struggle, but I have worked so hard to try to take every thought captive and make it obedient to Christ. So I think, getting your mind right is...
T, how do you do that? How do you take a thought captive and make it obedient? Like, what's the strategy for somebody on here that's like the scripture? It makes you you're like that hits, because it always impacts you. But they're like, how do I practically do that? Like, how do you do that?
Here's what I do. I say it out loud. So I get a thought in my mind. Could be insecurity. I don't have what it takes. Whatever it is for you, fill in the blank. And I will say out loud what God says about it instead of the way that I feel. And so every time I go up to preach on Sunday, I tell myself, I may feel scared, I may feel anxious, I may feel that, I don't have enough to say, whatever it is, and I have to say out loud, God, you're with me. God, I am more than a conqueror, right? And I go through all the things. And so I think
that's so good.
all the time, I ask my kids in the car, I'm speaking out the promises. And you have to get to a point, too, where you don't care who's around you. I think sometimes the person we're most insecure around is our spouse for whatever reason. I know some couples are like, I want to worship, but I feel like my husband, because he sees the bad and the ugly in me, he's going to question, what makes you think you can raise your hands and worship? And I think that you have to get to a place where you don't care who's around you. I don't care what you think about me. I don't care what you think about me. I'm going to speak the promises. I'm going to worship. I'm going to show gratitude, all the things. So
that's good.
I say it out loud.
Well, it's replacing the lie with the truth. Yeah. It's replacing the trash with the truth, right? We all have trash. Like, our minds are messed up.
Right.
Our minds are 100%. Battlefields. Like, we've talked about this before. Like, it's a battlefield, and there's these strongholds. There's these things that we've dealt with our whole life that we believe in because they've been these thoughts that we've had for so long, they feel like the truth. And then our reality, we look around, and all our circumstances reflect that same reality, and then we believe the lie as the truth. But it's like, man, if we could just identify the lie, because you know when it's a lie.
Right.
Like, you know you're not created to be insecure. You're not created to be fearful. You're not created to be in comparison, or like, we're just not created that way.
Yeah.
Because it makes us feel a certain way. So we know when things are going against how we were created. And so I love what you said. Most people just think about their thoughts, but you say the thought.
Yeah.
Like, I'm feeling insecure right now, but God, I know you didn't make me to be insecure.
And here's what I've learned too. I think that sometimes it's comfortable to stay in a broken mindset or broken thoughts. Sometimes it's comfortable to be fearful because you know you when you're in that state of mind. And I have had to convince myself that God's way, God's will, God's plan, I have to be convinced that it's better than the satisfaction that I'm feeling in the moment from the flesh. Because you're not going to feel that, so you have to fall back on your theology.
Talk about it. That's good.
God's will, God's plan. It has to be better. And if I am convinced that it's better, then I will discipline my thought and make it obedient to Christ. Because I'm convinced that even though this feels good in the moment, what God has is better. And I just feel like you got to know what you believe, because you're not going to always feel the emotion. And so you got to fall back on your theology.
So you mean to tell me, like, love is not always a feeling? Like, you don't always feel in love?
That is
or
a
you
decision.
Don't always feel like you want to worship, or feel like you want to serve, or feel like, we live by our feelings, right? That's why most people don't do things, because they don't, like, what do your kids say? I don't feel like cleaning my room. It's like, well, dude, I didn't ask you how you feel. I told you what to do. It's like, God's like, I told you who you are. I created you this way. I don't care what your feelings are. This is who you are.
Right.
And you got to, number one, believe that with every single part of you is what you're saying. That's good.
Hey, can I just say this real quick?
Yeah.
Everybody on here, you got to rewind this and go back and listen to the last, like, 45 seconds. That was so good. I mean, I would say that's probably the best 2 minutes that we've ever had. That's good. As far as what was said. That was so good, because in a great book to have a deep dive in that is Winning the War in Your Mind by Craig Rochelle. I love you, Craig, but that was better than what you wrote for sure. And but I mean, it takes work, right? Like, you gotta, and it is so familiar when you're stuck in those feelings, because at least it feels like you. Exactly. So you don't like it, but it just feels like me, and because it feels like me, I'm gonna stay stuck here.
Yeah.
And I love that, like, conviction. Like, you gotta know what the word says about you, or then how do you know that this is a thought that I need to take captive if it just, like, maybe I am this way. But if you start unmasking, like, what God says, and you can start saying, like, oh, now it's easier to identify that this doesn't. And too many people are stuck behind an unlocked door, and the key is just you bringing up your awareness, being aware of what it looks like. I remember I read this, I can't remember where it was, but it was like this nurse that was going through this, is it an NICU? Is that what it's called, T? You got enough kids, like the NICU, when you have a NICU, yeah.
Come on, shout out to Casey on the one.
Yeah, thank you, bro. Thank you, NICU. So the nurse is going through the NICU, and she spots out and says, hey, this baby doesn't look healthy. They're like, the baby's fine, right? And she presses, like, no, the baby's not right. And so they go and they take the baby and they test it, and it's got, it was whatever you had. No, it's whatever you had in your infection. Remember, what is it, the
Staph?
Staph.
No,
staph.
I did not have staph, by the way, just for the record. Cellulitis.
So we discovered it at the swimming pool. But the baby had this disease, I think it was staph or something like that. And they're like, how did you know? And it saved the baby's life. Like, the baby was going to die. And the interview's like, how did you know? She said, well, because I have such a clear picture of what a healthy baby looks like, that when I walked by and I saw that it was a dot, not a blot, like a blotch of blood, and I saw that the baby's stomach was a little protruding. Like, it was so clear what a healthy baby looked like, that when a baby that didn't match that showed up, I was so aware that that's not right. Yeah. And I think that's where the work comes in, and doing these bucket list items is like, you have to be so aware of your identity, so aware of the culture you're creating, so identity of your thoughts, so aware. If you're not, you're never going to notice when they show up, and before you know it, you're locked behind an unlocked door.
Yeah, that's good.
You know, and I think that's just such an important, thing to do, is like, this takes work.
Yeah.
Well, and it has a lot to do with your environment, right? If all you see is, unhealthiness all the time, you're going to think that unhealthiness is normal, right? Yeah. And so you got to look around. Like, you've heard it many times, like, look at the 5 people around you. Look at the families you spend your life with. Who do you hang out with on the weekends? Like, you're going to end up becoming like them. And if you're all kind of have unhealthy marriages, you're all kind of struggling financially, if you're all kind of living the same, poor me life, it's like, that's what you're going to get.
Get out of that crab bucket.
You have to, and it's uncomfortable, like going back to what you're saying. Like, you got to, because then other people are going to start going, well, you think you're better than us? You're trying to, moving on up, and what's happening here? So you got to change your environment. So you got to get around people who, I love that you do this a lot, Paul's like, hey, I'm getting around people who are way ahead of me.
Right.
I'm not just going to try to figure out this, business on my own, or this marriage thing on my own. I'm going to go to someone who's much further along, much more successful, and ask them all the questions, and ask. I love what you said a couple weeks ago. You said, hey, what question should I be asking you right now? I thought it was a great question. What should I be? Who do you know that I need to know?
Right.
It's like, man, we got to get around people who are much further ahead than us in environments, so we can identify where we're falling short.
Well, I'd love to, real quick, to put one thing I do, and it could be a big mountain that we're facing, or it could be something small, like overcoming a thought. I always tell myself, this is my disciple moment. And I feel like it's a phrase that has stuck with me. It was, you look all throughout Scripture, whether it's a big giant or a small giant, it was what the disciples, or just people in the Bible, did in the moments that made it to the pages of Scripture. And so if there's a thought in my mind that's bad, this is my disciple moment. Mariah, what are you going to choose to do? What is going to make it to the pages that you're writing in your life, right? What's going to, this is your, I remember when we were believing for Psalm, when you adopted Psalm, and it was when the mom was going to take him back. And I remember being at home, and I think I even told Tosh this, but I said, this is our disciple moment. It is what we're going to choose to do in the face of, and it could be big or it could be small. Yeah. But for me, just telling yourself, this is my disciple moment. What am I going to do?
Really good.
That should be a wristband that we give out. That is good, really good. Well, I think going into the last bucket list item, talking about gratitude, this is a big one. This is a big bucket that when you get it to overflow onto the other buckets, man, it's just like a life has changed. And so let's talk about it, like gratitude. Somebody, is like, man, I understand the power of gratitude. There's been things that have been out there, new reels that talk about the scientific proof of gratitude and how it makes a difference in your ability to generate all these different things. But like, how does somebody start to cultivate and develop this gratitude? Is it just a feeling? Is it a strategy? Like, what does this look like?
So good. Again, I believe it's a discipline. You're not going to always feel grateful, but you can discipline your body and your mind into a state of gratitude. It has become such a habit for me now. It took me so many years, and I still obviously fall short of it. But where I will wake up, and it's become such a habit to be grateful. God, thank you. God, thank you. And I'll walk around the house. God, thank you that we live in this home. God, thank you. And I believe, I talked to Brand about this before. We recently moved into a new home, and I kept telling him, like, I just feel so undeserving. Like, how did this happen? Like, there's no way we deserve. But again, we don't go off of what we deserve. We live by grace, right? But I just kept saying that. And I told him, I said, I feel like if there's one thing we did right, is we remained grateful for what we had. And a reason I know that I was grateful is because I wasn't, I was content. Even though I dreamed for more and I wanted a nicer home and I wanted more yard for my kids, I was still content.
That's good.
I was happy. And it's not that I'm not dreaming for bigger and better. It's not like my vision for my life was small. It was just, God, when it's the time, is the time. But for now, I'm going to remain grateful. And so I think that you can train your brain into becoming grateful. And again, the only way it's worked for me is by saying it out loud, you know?
It's so good. What about, it's like the person that's like working a job and they're like, I'm not giving him all because I don't like the guy, or I don't like this, or I don't like that. And my thought is like, you're keeping doors locked that God wants to open up because you're not working the way you should be working. You're sacrificing your character and who you are and who you need to be to step into the next door. And God's not going to, I don't think God blesses you if you're discontented. He's called us to be content, right? Yeah. I mean, Paul found contentment in all the different seasons and situations and storms and struggles and trials. And the one thing that makes me think of, Mariah, is like, you know, the old Chinese proverb, and I love this proverb. It's this proverb where I think Brandon, I was telling you about it the other day, right? Yeah. Where the guy, you know, the neighbors come by because this guy's horse runs off, right? And he's like, dude, what a tragedy! Like, you lost your horse, man. That's awful. And the guy's like, maybe. And then all of a sudden the next day, that horse brings back with it 7 stray horses. And then the neighbors come out like, oh my God, what a fortunate event! This is such a blessing. And the guy's like, maybe. And then the next day, one of his sons riding the horse trying to break it in, and he falls off and he breaks his leg. And all the neighbors come by like, oh my God, it's terrible. Like, he broke his leg. That's awful. And the guy's like, maybe. And the next day, the army comes around to recruit for the war, and they don't recruit his son because his leg's broken. And they're like, oh my God, wow, how fortunate. The guy's like, maybe. And the reality is, like, that's gratitude. Like, I'm not going to be, like, I don't know. Like, I'm just going to be content in every situation.
Exactly.
Like, because I know my gratitude is going to unlock different doors and take what might be something that I think this is terrible, and it's going to turn it for good. And I think that's a difficult thing, but it's probably the most impactful thing, the most necessary thing to combat whatever war somebody's battling. Yeah. I know without gratitude, I don't get through what I went through with Parker. Right. You know, if without me entering his gates every morning in prayer and supplication and thanking him for the victory that I was already declaring, and just being patient to see it through, but believing that it was going to come. Yeah. And being grateful that even if it didn't come when I wanted it to come, that my gratitude is in the fact that God's promises he'll work it together for good, and there's something even better coming. And I just think that, like, that's the strategy that you got to fight with is gratitude. It's such a big deal.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we do every single week at church, like, I'll go up there and before I preach, I'll always just try to remind them to, like, have a grateful heart. So we'll talk about, like, I'll say an encouragement. I'll say, just begin to thank him for anything. You might hear me say, like, thank you for the gas in your tank. Thank you for getting you out of bed. Thank you for making the clouds. Thank you for making the rain. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter the circumstance, but just begin to be grateful for your life. And I think people, like, man, they look around. I got nothing to be thankful for, man. Life isn't good right now. Like, it's like, did you sleep in a bed last night? Because we can drive around the city and see many people who are homeless. I was talking to Mariah this week. I showed up to a job site on Monday, and there was a guy there, and he had no clothes on, but he had a shirt on for pants. It kind of messed me up, dude. It's like 6 a.m, bro.
Well, it messed me up. I just got hit you, and I got like a visual.
He had a shirt on for pants. You know what I mean? Yeah. It wasn't a good visual. And again, we had just moved, so I still had some clothes in my car. And so I tried to offer this guy like 2 different pairs of shoes, like some sheets. I had pillows in my car, so I just left that situation because I was kind of grumpy. It's Monday morning, you know. It's like 6. Why do I got to go do this? But it's like this guy's sleeping on a concrete stair with a shirt as his pants. Yeah. And so I can go, thank God for my old truck. Thank God for my house. Thank God for the quarter tank I got. Thank God for the amazing spaghetti Mariah cooked last night. Like, right? It's like you just be thankful for anything, and it's going to unlock your whole world.
Well, I think that, too, we think that it's life's job to make us grateful, but it's our job to remain grateful. And so often we wait when the situation works out, when the circumstances comes in my way or works in my favor, then I'll be grateful. And I think that there's so much power in disciplining yourself to remain grateful. Philippians 4:4, I think it is. Rejoice in the Lord always.
Say it again.
Say it again. Rejoice. It's rejoice. Be grateful. Love. Like you know what I mean? So yeah, I just think that there's so much power in gratitude, and I could go on and on about it, because I think that gratitude makes whatever you do have enough. I think it, and I also think there's so many promises attached to gratitude as well.
Do you write it down? Like write the things down, or you just speak them out loud, think about them?
Speak them out loud all the time. And I was trying to teach my kids this too. At our old home, we'd be like, they would say things like, oh, we just want a bigger yard. And he'd be like, yeah, boys, but our home, like, look at our home. Look, we're on the water. Like, look at what we have. And so I'm also trying to teach my kids to be great, even now.
And that's culture.
It's culture. It's teaching, even now. They'll be like, I wish we had a bigger basketball court. And I'm like, boys, look around you. And they'll hear me say it. Can you believe this is our home? Can you believe? I am so grateful. And I think your kids have to hear you say that and live it out. And then it'll stick.
To me, like, if you don't have gratitude, I don't want to talk to you. Yeah. Yeah. I don't want to hire you. You know what I mean? Like, I'll intentionally set people up when I'm interviewing them. Like, I'll open the door for them. If they don't say thank you, you're out.
Right. Yeah.
Like, I'm looking for work ethic, intelligence, where you're able to build skill. Yeah. The third is gratitude. Like, you gotta have 3, and probably the most important one is gratitude, because if you're not grateful, when I hire you, like, you're gonna eventually find something to be discontented with. You're gonna be a cancer within the organization. Your attitude's gonna suffer. You're gonna eventually think you're not getting what you should. There's gonna be a spirit of entitlement.
So true.
I mean, it's such a bad. And the thing is this: there's so many people that you're like, oh, once I would have that, then I'd be grateful. And that person that's got it all, they're not grateful.
Right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, they're still thinking, like, I need this, and this. And it's not circumstantial. It's a strategy. It's a gratitude strategy.
Yeah.
You know?
Crushed it.
That was good
Amazing
stuff. This is worth a rewatch,
it is.
A share.
It is.
If you actually are on here watching this and you care about people, if you don't care about people, don't listen to what I'm going to say right now. But if you do care about people, this is one that you'd want to share, because it might make a big difference in their life. Maybe they're stepping into summer and they're kind of like overwhelmed. Like, man, I got all these kids. What am I going to do here? Or they just don't have a strategy. And see, you can't have a beautiful, unbelievable, impactful summer if you're going to let the summer happen to you. You got to happen to the summer.
Exactly.
And that's where you get these bucket lists going, and you start saying, all right, let me unpack these. How can I put these into place? And by the way, do it with your family. Yeah. Like, I love the whole, like, hey, don't say that, you know, because it's so easy. And then once that takes root, man, that's like, that ain't a good summer. You could be having all the fun in the world, but everybody's attitude sucks. It's like, you know, I always look at, like, you go to Africa and you see a kid that's got nothing, and they got a smile, and they're so happy. It's like, dude, this isn't an external thing. This is an internal project, you know? And so, Mariah, thank you for being the guest today. It was so good. More often. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
I'm down.
We're not going to look as smart as we typically look. The contrast is not in our favor, but it was good. So, all right, guys. Well, hey, appreciate you joining. Make it a massive week. Be strong, stay steadfast, and we'll see you next week.